Rebuild of the favorites. We here for the latest. South side or the north side. Not tuned to the greatest. Home team for the home teams. Both sides got our own rings. On the mound or the long ball. But we don't put the wrong strings. Yeah. It's that time of the year now. Wrigley or guarantees for the whole league that we hear now. New show with a new mood. Discussions and interviews. Trade rumors that might be. This is Pinwheels and Knife.
Hello and welcome to the Pinwheels pregame show, bringing you White Sox talk every Wednesday at noon, or I guess today closer to 12:30-ish due to some technical difficulties. But regardless, we got a lot to talk about today. White Sox got a couple new coaches and a new outfielder. So we'll discuss who are these guys, how this new outfielder fits into the White Sox offensive plans, and a couple old friends playing in the Dominican Winter League. I got a couple updates from that as well. Now, last night, Pat Murphy won the National League Manager of the Year for the Brewers. Led the Brewers 93 wins, division title. A lot of Cubs fans kind of upset because they were like, hey, we got Craig Counsell, who we thought was the guy over there. And, you know, Craig Counsell's supposed to be doing that for us with what was on paper a much better roster. And one of the smarter baseball minds that I know, or one of the people whose opinion I trust and respect regarding baseball, K Fitz, and he was in our Pinwheels and Ivy chat, and you know he sends a message. You know he's like, this Pat Murphy was always the why for Craig Counsell. That's not true. Real ball knowers know that the straw that stirred the drink over there was Walker McKibben. The White Sox knew one of the White Sox newest hires. So he was a data analytics coordinator. He is now the White Sox bench coach. So he did a couple different roles in the Brewers organizations last year. So a lot of them having to do with pregame prep. His official title in his last role with the Brewers was the run prevention coordinator. He's now getting the promotion to be the White Sox bench coach, and Will Venable released that yesterday, talking about it on Foul Territory podcast. So who is this guy? Well, Walker McKibben. I got to make sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly here. It's a little bit McKibben. We'll go with McKibben for now, so I'm corrected otherwise. But so he served as the Brewers run prevention coordinator, which sounds like a made-up title, just to get a guy on the staff. But if you look at his resume, he does seem like a pretty smart guy. Now, first off, just as far as run prevention, I'm like, what does a run prevention coordinator do? A lot of it's going in to strategy, defensive positioning, up making sure guys are ready to do that job correctly. If you look at the run prevention, they do have a stat for that. Believe it or not, I was like, well, let's see if the Brewers were any good at preventing runs, since this guy was their run prevention coordinator. And they were. They had the third most defensive runs prevented at 27. Meanwhile, the White Sox run prevention, it ranked 29th in the league with minus 34 runs prevented, which I don't even know how that happens. You're just giving up plus 34 runs, I guess, that shouldn't have been prevented. I don't know how they keep that stat, but the Brewers were pretty good at it. This guy has a track record. If you look at all the jobs he's done on LinkedIn, I was kind of looking through his resume because there's not a ton out there about our new bench coach, Walker. So some of his coaching titles have included Major League Strategy, Associate Pitching, Catching, and Strategy Coach, and then most recently, Run Prevention Coordinator. And that's the titles he kind of had in the Brewers organization. Now, there's a couple Brewers beat reporters. They're talking about kind of what he was doing as the run prevention coordinator. So one of the things that they said he did was he really worked with catchers really well. And he helped defensively, specifically William Contreras, improve a lot. When he was in the Brewers organization, I believe it was like he had negative 11 defensive runs saved. I'm going to make sure I had that right. But upon joining Brewers organization, completely flipped that, turned him into an all-star. And his defense was one of the better reasons why. I think that ended up turning in from minus 11 to plus 11. I have to double check my facts on that. But that was like a big thing he did, was working with catchers and helping them improve. And a lot of the catchers that have gone through there. And that's why Milwaukee was seen by a lot of people like, hey, you want to reboost your stock or develop a catcher or at least improve a catcher. This is a good team to go to because of what Walker was doing over there at working with the pitchers and catchers and the run prevention coordinator. And they also say, you know, the catcher captain of the defense too, that's going to help you save a lot of runs because they're usually the ones overseeing how everyone is positioned. So Walker had a hand in that. And it's also encouraging too, because if you look at who the White Sox got coming up through the system, one of their better prospects, their fourth ranked prospect, Edgar Quiro. He's a guy that you probably want to make sure that he develops well, because they got a lot writing on how his development goes. So this Walker McKibben could be a pretty good hire as far as, or at least help them a lot in that sort of role. So I was pretty happy with that too. They also got a new director of hitting, which is kind of like a new position they had Brian Bannister, who they hired from the Giants. He was director of pitching. A lot of White Sox people, myself included, they've really praised that hire and just kind of what he was able to do in San Francisco and why that was a good decision to bring him over. They now did something similar. They got a new hitting coach, or hitting director, I should say, Ryan Fuller. Now, Ryan Fuller, he's coming over from the Orioles organization. Orioles don't have as good of a track record, I think, as the Giants do. I wouldn't say the Orioles are necessarily a really well-run benchmark organization. But what I like about Fuller and kind of where he fits into the picture is like he's worked with, coming up to the Orioles, kind of similar, work with a lot of these young players and highly touted prospects. And the jump that it takes from, hey, you might be tearing it up in the minor leagues, it's a big adjustment when you get to the major league level. You no longer have like 1,000 OPS for like the first time in your career, and how you have to handle better pitching. So I kind of like the fact that they got a guy here on a team that was a pretty good hitting team. Like, you look at a lot of their offensive categories and the numbers when Ryan Fuller was over there. I mean, they were very good when he was their hitting director. And I think that's a plus. And the fact that he's worked with some of these guys that were younger prospects, like the Colton Cowsers of the world, the Kiersteds of the world, Jackson Hollidays, that's going to correlate over too. Now, he was a co-hitting instructor over in Baltimore. And near the end of the season, Baltimore, especially during the playoffs and the back half of the season, the production dipped quite a bit, which was a little bit concerning on that end. But I do think the guy, is the director of hitting. He's not going to be like the main hitting coach. I do think it was kind of an interesting addition. Now, I was listening to him talk on the White Sox podcast with Chuck Garfien, and he was kind of talking about his philosophy and what he would like to see hitters do. Now, he did a good point, we talk about all these good coaches and people coming over here, and I think McKibben included. You're seeing a lot of smart guys, and we've said this a lot. Getz is attracting a lot of smart people, which is an encouraging sign. He's bringing in, for whatever reason, these very good qualified people, they want to go and work for the White Sox, and Getz is selling them on this vision that it sounds like is it sounds like it's working. Whatever he is selling, these people are buying, which is good. You'll love to hear that. Now, look at some of the White Sox. I mean, the White Sox, they certainly could use the help. They rank last in almost every major offensive category. Orioles, on the other hand, you look at what they were doing last year. They had the second most homers in the MLB. They had the third most extra base hits, third highest slugging percentage. And they also rank inside the top 10 in runs scored, RBIs, batting average. All of those, actually, they were inside the top 7. Now, as I mentioned, they did kind of cool off near the back half of the season. But his big approach when he was talking on that podcast, he was like, look, a lot of this is going to come down to what your player personnel is. So we could be great, but I don't know what type of team I'm going to have. So that's going to affect how I'm coaching a lot of these guys. Do we have guys that hit for power? What does Venable want this team to do? That's kind of going to help coach him. But the one thing he did say that I think does translate, and we've been talking about this a lot, how many times during the season I was talking about the White Sox plate discipline, where they be expanding the zone way too frequently. His thing was, hey, look, I want these guys. If you look at some of the better hitters they have, and he used Ryan O'Hearn as an example, who you might be familiar with, the Kansas City Royals. He was an okay player with Kansas City, but he really kind of found his footing with the Orioles because they were teaching him, look, we want you guys to have a better command of the strike zone. The White Sox don't have a good command of the strike zone. And we're going to get into that in a little bit when we talk about their other free agent signing, the most recent free agent signing they have. But they tend to expand the zone a lot. Their chase rate was pretty high. They had one of the worst chase rates in the MLB. If you're looking overall top to bottom, he's like, hey, I want these guys looking for a spot in the zone, not just swinging at strikes or you're taking walks and all that. All that's important, but knowing what pitches to swing at and swinging at it with a purpose. You look at some of the better hitters in baseball, and that's what Ryan O'Hearn learned to do really well, and that's kind of how he turned his season around. You look at some of the better hitters. Let's take Aaron Judge, for example. He gets ripped on a lot at Twitter. Like, well, look at where all of these like home runs are coming. Guys, pitchers are serving him. If you look at his heat map, almost all of his hits and home runs are right around the same location. There is a lot of overlay and a lot of red right in the middle of the strike zone. And you look at it, it's like, well, he's just hitting pitches. Well, like that's what good hitters do. They wait for a good pitch to hit, and when they get their pitch, they take advantage of it. And Shohei Ohtani is very similar too. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of hits where he's reaching outside the strike zone. There's a spot that they know, hey, this is my zone. When there's a pitch in this part of the strike zone, you better swing on it. This is something Luis Robert actually talked about at the beginning of the season that he was trying to work on last offseason. And he alluded to it a little bit when he got off to that hot start in April before he got injured, just talking about, hey, I mean, I'm looking for pitches that are in a specific spot. That's what these guys do. And if this new hitting director can instill that into these guys, Ryan Fuller, and that this message gets across, and we can at least prove in that sense where they're looking for good hittable pitches, I think we're going to see these offensive numbers improve a lot. But it kind of depends what's around them. Now, his influence has already been felt, I think, on the White Sox. Clearly, they respect Ryan Fuller's opinion because shortly after he was hired, they signed their first big free agent signing, but they signed one of his former players that he had coached in Baltimore with Austin Slater. Now, Austin Slater, he didn't play very long in Baltimore. In fact, the majority of his career, first 7+ years of his career, were spent in San Francisco. If you look at the overall numbers, they're not going to jump off the page offensively. Career slash line, 252, 342, 385. That's not too, I mean, it's not going to wow you. He's also fresh off one of his worst seasons of his career. He was hovering near the Mendoza line most of the season. He hit 209 with a 586 OPS last year. So not great. So why the hell is Chris Getz targeting a guy like this? There's two reasons. He hits left-handed pitching well, and he gets on base. Getz is trying to do, in this signing, I'm not jumping up and down about it. I don't think it's a huge game-changing move, but I kind of get what he's trying to do. But this sounds to me, because they kind of have a new approach this year. Last year, Chris Getz was saying, around this time last year, winter meetings and all of that, hey, look, we're really trying to set out to improve the defense. We need more athletes. This defense has got to get better. Free agent pitchers don't want to come here. My goal is to improve the defense. Well, because they didn't have a whole lot of guys wanting to come there, you saw a lot of these, hey, we're going to take a flyer on this guy, bargain bin shop here, bargain bin shop there. Yeah, he's not great, but he's better than what we have currently on defense. Like, you look at a guy like Martin Maldonado. That guy was, they clearly signed him, or bringing in Nicky Lopez, Paul DeYoung even. Look, hey, we know these guys aren't great hitters, or the track record's not great, but they are defensive improvement from what we had last year. And I think that's kind of what you're going to get with Slater. I think it's one of these guys that's like, yeah, he's not great, but like we see a vision here where he's going to help us improve slightly from what we were doing last year. Now let's get into what this guy does well. Because as we mentioned, he didn't have a great season last year. And I mentioned that he hits lefties really well. Last year was an inverse for like the first time of his career. He actually hit righties better than lefties. Against lefties, he was quite terrible for most of the season. I believe in his splits, he's batting like 188. I want to say I'd have to double check that, but it wasn't pretty, which was kind of an outlier. So then White Sox are hoping, hey, hitter-friendly park, we'll let you reset. Worst case, best case scenario, he tears it up first half of the season. We can flip him for a couple more prospects. Teams are clearly interested in this guy for whatever reason. He was traded twice last year. Got traded to the Reds, and then after 8 games, the Orioles, who were in the thick of a playoff race, like, actually, I think we could use this guy. So first thing we'll talk about is, and I think this is one of the reasons that Ryan Fuller, new hitting director, recommended him. And he talked about this too. He's like, this guy's got a really good command of the strike zone. He gets on base, even despite that terrible season last year. He doesn't hit for much power. He wasn't hitting for any average. He still had over 10% walk rate, which was incredible because you wouldn't think a guy like that, who is struggling most of the year, would be seeing a whole lot of hittable pitches. But it was pretty clear he knew what to look for and at least had some idea of what the strike zone was, because he gets on base a lot. And it wasn't just an outlier either. You go through his seasons, he's had a couple seasons where he had a walk rate of close to like 12%. He had 1 year in 2020. Now, mind you, shortened season, but it was up near 15%. The guy walks a lot. And that makes up a lot of his OBP because he doesn't get a ton of hits. He's only like a career 250 hitter. So that was very interesting. And you look at the White Sox last year, they didn't get a whole lot of guys on base. They didn't walk a whole lot. They ranked last in the MLB in walks. They ranked last in the MLB in on base percentage. And they owned the fourth, and we alluded to this earlier, they own the fourth highest chase rate in the MLB as a whole, which is not great. And I think it tells you why they had a lot of the struggles they did. They don't have a whole lot of excuses in that hitter-friendly park. In a division that's not, let's be honest, not great. Like Cleveland's got some good pitching. Like Kansas City, obviously they're a playoff team, they're improved, but there's no one in that division that's like, wow, they got lights out. The offensive numbers should have been a lot better than what they were. Now I get you also have the Cy Young and Screwball who's with the Tigers and everything, but like top to bottom, a lot of these bullpens especially didn't really blow me away with what they had in that division. There's not a whole lot of reasons these numbers should be as bad as they were. Slater last year, he has a career 10.6 walk rate. I said he had a 10.6 last season. It was 12.3 last season, but he got a career 10.6, which, goes to show you. And he only had a chase rate of 18.6% last year. So it was a lot better. His walk rate's better than league average. He doesn't chase a lot of pitches. The White Sox did that a lot last year. Now, going back to what we were talking about, he hits lefties really well. I think how they plan on using him is he's not going to be an everyday starter. Because what struck me is everyone's like, oh, they took in a flyer in the Slater. I'm done with flyers. We took a flyer on Nomar Mazara. We took a flyer on Dominic Fletcher. That didn't work out. We're always taking flyers on guys. I'm done getting excited about taking AJ Pollock. The list goes on. So, we bring in Austin Slater, and it's like, all right. But like, I'm done being like, this guy could turn things around. Yeah, I think he is. He is what it is. Is he going to change things? No, he's going to be a replacement level player, in my opinion. But what the hell do I know? But he does hit, against lefties. That was an issue for the White Sox last year. And if you're trying to provide some protection to some of the guys you have, because they got Zach DeLoach still competing for that right field job, I still think they really like Fletcher's defense. He did have a pretty good defensive year last year. So I think they still want to see what they got with him. Now you bring in this guy who's kind of been doing this for the Giants. He's been a fourth outfielder most of his career, platooning. In fact, most of the starts he's had have only been against left-handed pitchers because he hits them so much better than righties throughout his career. He's played all three outfield positions. He's got over 100 games in each outfield position. So he's very capable. You can move him around. You got to give Robert a day off, plug and play. The split situation with in right field. So I think it's going to be kind of a platoon thing. And you look at what the White Sox have done against lefties, specifically DeLoach, who I think he's going to be platooning with. And I think this is kind of what gets his thought process was. And let me pull up that. I'm going to make sure we got the right numbers here. So here we go. Fletcher against lefties last season. Now, he didn't hit anyone particularly well. His splits against righties weren't much better, but they were worse against lefties. This is what Dominic Fletcher, who many assume be the starting right fielder. Here's his splits. He slashed 176, 276, 216 against Southpaws last year. The Southsiders as a whole, the whole offense, the chase rate was high. They also didn't hit lefties very well. They had 585 fewer hits against left-handed pitchers than right-handed pitchers last year, and they slashed just 220, 284, 326. Slater now, between 2020 and 2023, now as we mentioned, last year was kind of an outlier, 141 WRC plus against lefties. It's pretty good. Career slash line, 271, 365, 429, compared to just 229, 316, 333 mark against righties. So last year he did hit just 188 against lefties, but when he got to Baltimore, working with Fuller, who was kind of the he was the co-hitting instructor there, his WRC plus shot up to 114 against left-handers in his last 79 plate appearances down the stretch. So he really kind of turned it on with Fuller. I think Fuller liked working with them. They clearly like his approach and the way he fit into things. I think he put in the good word to Chris Getz. Getz is like, all right, hey, let's bring him in. So I like this philosophy with him. Like, look, we want a guy. The team didn't hit lefties very well. This guy can hit lefties. That's going to help. Specifically, our right fielder, he didn't hit lefties well either. This guy can play right field. That's gonna help us there. He can play a couple different positions. He's got some versatility on top of playing all three outfield positions. He's also played some first base. He did have an appearance at second base and third base, but he only had one game there, so that's kind of an outlier. I'm not really going to count that. So we'll just call him a first baseman and outfielder for now, mainly an outfielder. So he fits some needs. Fourth outfielder, platoon guy, hits lefties, gets on base. That's checking a lot of boxes. Now, this is why I think that's what Getz is thinking. This is why I'm not as high on this signing as some other people I've seen. I think he's a replacement level player. I'm not a huge fan of the new modern day where it's all about matchups and you got to slap all these guys together to get the best matchup. Like, oh, this guy can only pitch against lefty. He's a lefty specialist. This guy can only hit lefties. This guy can only hit righties. Are you really that good at your job if you can only do like part of it? Like, if you're a blue chip baseball player, you should be able to go up there and hit against that anyone. That's why I kind of sold a lot of my Gavin Sheets stock, is because like you see how much he struggled against lefties. It's like, well, if you can only hit righties, how useful are you if I can't have you in the lineup every day? That'd be like in my job at ABC 17. They're like, yeah, he's good at breaking news and whatnot, but he really struggles with the political and the local government stuff. So like, we're only going to put him out in the field when there's breaking news. How useful am I to that company if I can only do like half of the stuff they want me to do? Or if they just keep trotting me out there and like I sound like a chimpanzee having a stroke because I don't know how to do like any local government stuff, that's not doing anyone any good either. They have to use me. Who's to say they have, like, what if they have to use me in a pinch and then I just stink because I can only do half the job? So I'm not a huge fan of signing guys like, yeah, we're only going to play him half the time against left-handed pitchers when there's a left-handed starter on the mound. I always thought, and I mean, look, I'm no professional baseball player, but I always thought when I was playing, you need to kind of get in a rhythm as a hitter. And I like getting as many reps as possible. And like it would, if I had a good game, then I had to sit out the next game because it was a righty. Me personally, in my philosophy, those aren't the light type of guys I like to target, but he does fit some needs for the White Sox. And Getz has said, like, look, the guys we're targeting this offseason and any trade or free agent signing, it's to help improve the offense. So we saw this approach last year, but on the defensive side, and now he's trying it with the offensive side. Quite frankly, I don't think it did much. Now, the White Sox defense did improve, despite all that talk, a little bit. But here's what they improved by. They ranked 29th in the MLB in runs prevented. And they also ranked 29th in outs above average at minus 42. But they did reduce their total errors from 2023 from 95 to 90. So you could say some progress had been made, even though they ranked in the bottom of the league in most of those stats. So, we saw Getz attempting to fix the defense last year. I don't think it did all that much. Slight improvement. I foresee the same thing happening if these are the types of moves they're going to go out and get. And I think this is what you're going to have to get because they don't really have the capital to invest in some of these other guys. We've said it before. That's why they're getting all these coaches like a McKibben or Walker, and you're bringing in all these smart guys because they're trying to rebuild the foundation of this thing first. Make it a winning culture where guys want to come here. That's also something that the new hitting director said, Fuller, listening to him talk to Chuck Garfien, he was like, we want to make this a place where free agents want to come. Like if you had a down year where you can feel like you can come here and you're going to be able to rebuild your stock. You're going to succeed here because they have people that are going to like give you the right information and the right tools to succeed. So that's going to make them more attractive. They're like, oh, how convenient for the White Sox, a team that's, middle of the pack in spending historically in the MLB to be, that's going to be their approach. Yeah, we'll be willing to spend on free agents, but we'll get the guys like the Cody Bellingers of the world. Like, hey, we were once good. We're trying to rebuild our stock. Let's go to Chicago. So bravo, guys. That's how I interpreted that. Anyway, maybe I'm just senile from watching so many White Sox games over the years. I will say this though, Herb Lawrence on CHGO had an interesting point that he posted the other day. He's like, this White Sox rebuild is going to take a lot longer than people think. He said it's going to take about 10 years till they make the playoffs again. I don't think it's going to take that long, but it was interesting and it did make me think. And I kind of had this internal debate with myself. I'm like, boy, I wonder how long this thing is going to actually take, because I try to remain positive. There's not a whole lot to be positive about this team with, man. But if you live your life with negativity, what fun is that? It's too much energy to just walk around being angry and complaining all day. So I try and look at the positives. And I've been saying for weeks, hey, you know what, Chris Getz, that we've seen a pattern here now. Smart guy, he's getting smart people to come, want to work for him. You see the vision kind of like, okay, that makes sense. But then when Herb brought that up, I'm like, it's almost kind of like in football when you have like an offensive coordinator that's like really good. And if they're so good, all these other teams, what's to say they're going to stick around this long? Other teams are just going to come in and poach all their guys. Well, Chris Getz is doing it. Who's to say these guys they are. A lot of them are just going to use it as a stepping stone. They're going to get poached away pretty soon, especially if they're doing a really good job. I was like, well, so yeah, maybe it will take longer because even if we have these coaches in place, it's not going to take too long. But, it started debating this. I'm like, well, no. One, it's a good thing if other teams want the coaches and what we're doing here because it means we're doing something right. If it did get to that point. And two, it's not even about the coaches. I think a lot of it is about you're trying to bring in people to help reset the culture and how they do things. That's why if you go back to the McKiven hire as the new bench coach, that's why I really like that hire too. A lot of his former jobs were about strategy, analytics, and like looking at data. His first job he ever got after he was done playing was at the Cubs minor league system and looking at video. He was a video intern and just looking at film. And now all the coaching roles with the Brewers revolved around strategy. What's something that we heard from Pedro Grifol that never happened? The White Sox have been lacking for years, even before Pedro. There was games they came out there and they did not look prepared. And we saw it in articles that came out too from ESPN and the New York Times. Their scouting department way behind. They're bringing in a guy that knows scout. He's been a scout before. He's done the data, video analytics, run prevention coordinator. So I think that is going to help, along with some more tools, get these guys better prepared to come in and day out. And that's about culture. That's about attitude. That's what discipline is doing the right thing when you're supposed to be doing it. And I think there's a lot of times we could see, and I think you see it with a lot of the injuries. That's why Eloy got a lot of flack. Because you'd watch him and you'd see him show up looking a little doughy, and then you'd see him injured. It's like, well, that guy doesn't look like he has a ton of discipline. Does that look like a guy that was doing what he's supposed to be doing during the offseason? No, we don't know that for sure. And you hate to blame a guy for getting injured, but that's how a lot of people felt. It was frustrating. It's like these guys don't look like they're doing what they should be doing. We're seeing it on a daily basis. How do you make this many mistakes? How do you look this unprepared? I think a lot of it was because they were unprepared. So now you're bringing in a guy that he's got experience doing that. And that's what it's about, even if these guys do get poached. Getting guys that come in there and set the culture. This is how we do things. When the next guy comes in, you don't miss a beat. You don't miss a beat. So I'm going to have the right guy at the top. It's kind of like a good coaching tree. Why you see some of these guys that have excellent coaching trees in the NFL. Doesn't matter. Like Bill Belichick and the Patriots, they were good for a long time. They had a lot of these coaches getting poached away that everyone thought was good. They still kept their success. They just plug a new guy in there. Nick Saban, Alabama, same thing. That's why I want Wendell Villanova and the White Sox to be. Hey, we're going to be a coaching factory. Teams are going to want our, I hope that McKiven in a couple of years, 5 years from now, after we won a division title in the playoffs because of his help, I hope teams are calling, hey, this guy's pretty good. We want him as our manager. Some of the heading director, right? All these guys. So that's what you hope. And so that's why I do think, I was like, wow, man, Herb might have a point here. Now, that wasn't the point he was making. He was just saying there's so many holes they have, but that kind of that sparked that kind of interesting debate that I was having this week. It's like, man, I wonder if he's right. I'm like, well, no, they aren't taking the right steps to hire all these guys. Well, if they're so good, other teams are just going to hire them. So I'm like, well, so I do think, though, it is going to take a while. To his point, it is going to take a while. We did have kind of an expedited rebuild. The other point he made that I thought was a valid one, that last rebuild we had much better players to trade away than what we had now. Like Chris Sale, you kidding me? He's about to win the Cy Young tonight when we're recording this on Wednesday. Probably he's going to win the Cy Young award tonight. But that's who we had traded away. This year, this time around, we got a guy that we just made a starter in Garrett Crochet. Now, I think Garrett Crochet is excellent. I think he could be just as good as Sale, but the resume is not quite the same when they traded him. Adam Eaton, same way. Say what you want about Adam Eaton. He was a very productive ball player for the White Sox for a while. And they might have gotten a little bit more than they bargained for, but he had a very good track record. Jose Quintana, same thing. A lot of these guys are selling upside, not what they're not proven commodities. So the players they had last time, they were better, so they got a better return in theory. So that's also why it was a little bit quicker. So I think this is going to take even longer too, because we can kind of see, and they're putting a lot of their eggs in the basket with the young guys they've gotten back. They're relying on restocking the talent with more trades, as we can see, since Austin Slater was our most recent free agent signing, and I think that's a lot of what it's going to be, or signings like that. So, I do think he's probably right. I don't think it takes 10 years. But the rate they are going, within the next 2 at least, I don't see him making the playoffs this year or next year. And they also got that weird thing with the draft where they can't pick in the top 10 this year. And the way it works, I think it's kind of like every other year. So they could be bad for 3 years and they can only get one pick inside the top 10 in that span, in theory. So we'll see how it plays out. They don't have a whole lot of incentive to tank, but I think to his point, this is not going to be a quick fix like the last rebuild. And I don't think that was quick either, but from the time they started trading guys, you could see some fruit start to bear around 2019. I thought that was a competitive team. They weren't a playoff team, but that was when you could see, like, okay, it's starting to come together. 4 years to make the playoffs from when they started that rebuild. Say they started this rebuild last year, and I think it's going to take longer than the last one. It's going to be over 5, I think, before they make the playoffs. And I hope I'm wrong. And I'm usually pretty optimistic on this show, but like I think Herb was onto something. Shouldn't be surprised though. Wheaton North alumni, so it's usually where the best and brightest in the Chicago suburb area are from. Old friends doing some stuff in winter ball. Jose Abreu playing down in the Puerto Rican Winter League with San Juan. He was leading the league in home runs for a little bit. 6 games in, he had 4 homers, 10 RBIs. Apparently, Francis Romero, he's MLB insider. He's been right on stuff before. He's pretty dialed in, especially with a lot of the Latin American players. He's like, hey, some MLB teams, they're interested. He's turning some heads. And Abreu, he said that's one of the reasons he wanted to play in the Dominican Winter League is show people he wants to make an MLB comeback. So I am rooting for Jose. Jose Abreu to me is like everything you should be as a professional. He's one of my favorite White Sox players. If I had to do a Mount Rushmore White Sox players in my lifetime, anyway, he's right up there. I think it's Mark Burley, Paul Konerko, Jose Abreu. I don't know who the fourth would be. Maybe Chris Sale? Recency bias? I but like Jose Abreu is my Mount Rushmore favorite White Sox players ever. I think if I was doing a history of White Sox players, he's probably still on my Mount Rushmore. So I'm rooting for it. I don't think the White Sox should sign Jose Abreu, but I am rooting for him. That guy, if you're not rooting for Jose Abreu, are you even really? I mean, how can you not root for a guy like that? That guy gave this organization everything he had for nearly a decade and was loyal for no reason. All they did was put shitty teams in front of him. They didn't even want to re-sign him, and the owner had to talk Rick Hahn into it. And then he comes out and wins an MVP. He once said, like, I'll sign myself if the White Sox don't sign. Always produce. Just like season after season of 20 plus homers, 90 plus RBIs. Well, the one thing he struggled at was defense, and it got better and better and better each year. He worked his ass off, and he was always on the field. Even when he was hurt. Man, battling through injuries, clearly in pain. That doubleheader stood out when he was in a violent collision trying to catch a pop fly, collides with the base runner. It looked like he'd be out of the game, comes back second game of that doubleheader, he gets a home run. That's the type of, so I'm really pulling for him. It was very sad to see what went down in Houston. I thought Houston would be a nice stop for him because historically where he struggled with the White Sox was in April or early in the season and kind of heat up as the weather heated up. So I'm like, Houston, they got that dome. Maybe that'll kind of buck the April trend there. And it did not. And even with the extra line of protection, he just kind of declined pretty quickly. Now, I don't know. He was 27 when he was a rookie with the White Sox. I don't know if he was actually 27. He might have been even older than that. Who knows? So my age might be catching up with them, but man, I'm really pulling for him. I hope he gets one last shot. It was sad to see him go out the way he did. I'd like one or two more good Jose Abreu seasons or respectable Jose Abreu seasons because I like rooting for him with him. Now, one guy I didn't enjoy quite as much watching. He's not on my Mount Rushmore White Sox players anytime soon as Yoel Moncada, but some news with him. He got injured a few weeks ago. There was an international tournament, the Premier 12, over in China. Taipei. I don't know. World geography. Who knows? Anyway, international tournament. He was playing for Team Cuba. He got hit in the hand and had to leave a game in the 5th inning. I think they were playing. It doesn't even matter who they were playing. But anyway, it looked like the photo that was shown on Twitter. He looked like he was in a lot of pain. And Francis Romero reported that he was probably going to miss the whole tournament. There's a lot of swelling on his hand. He didn't break his hand, but he would miss the rest of the tournament. So I was like, that's going to be interesting because he's another guy that's really trying to impress scouts and reboost his Sox so he can, get some cash in free agency. He just lost out on a pretty big signing bonus from the White Sox, $25 million, I believe. Or club option, I should say, not signing bonus, but missed out a pretty big club option there. So he's trying to rebuild his value. I was like, hand injury, that might be tough. It's just reported recently that he's going to sign with the same team in the Puerto Rican Winter League with San Juan is Jose Abreu. So the band's getting back together. down in Puerto Rico. See how it goes. That team right now, I think they're second in the standings. They've only played 6 games, but Abreu's team 4-2 in those 6 games. At last I checked, now they're adding Yoan Moncada to the squad. So, maybe they make a run at the title. If you need a baseball fix, Puerto Rican Winter League, they got some former White Sox friends you can go watch. That's all we got for you. Sorry, it's a little bit all over the map. Been kind of a crazy couple weeks over here in Moberly, Missouri. I'm kind of living like a hermit too. A little scatterbrained today, so a little all over the place. So apologies for that. We'll button it up a little bit better next week. Much like the White Sox, there's some room to improve. But we appreciate you sticking around. Regardless, I'm sure there'll be plenty more to talk about for this team coming up next week, and as this offseason rolls along. Now, I do want to tease this. With this Pinwheels pregame show, we haven't had a whole lot of normal Pinwheels and Ivy episodes. We are working on getting the band back together. We are working on having a good one. We'll get some Cubs talk on there too. Aldo, Fids. We're trying to work on getting a couple dates set up. It's a little difficult with the way the schedules have been. Hopefully got to get Southside Zoe back on the show soon. So be on the lookout the next couple weeks. We probably will have an actual Pinwheels episode. So it's not just me out here rambling about the White Sox on a Wednesday afternoon. But regardless, I appreciate all of you listening to said rambling. So thank you so much. If you enjoyed the show, you can catch us on Spotify, like and subscribe, all that stuff. On YouTube, however you may be watching. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your week.